Well, this is your friendly, local, dangerous dinosaur again, and I'm here for another episode of my bitching and complaining and all kinds of heinous stuff. So, today I would like to ask, what would you do? What would you do in the following situation? And I would hope you would give this some serious thought. Let's assume that you're in the computer store. And you go in there and your computer is on the fritz. It won't boot up. So you go to the Geek Squad or whatever the local affiliate reasonable facsimile is, and you go to the counter and you say, my computer won't boot. And the guy says, I'm sorry, and turns his back on you and waits on another customer. What would you do then? Or, next phase, you go in there and say, my computer won't boot up. He says, well, I'll leave it here and we'll look at it and see what we can do. You leave it there with $100 and you go away, and the guy, you come back the next day and he says, well, we couldn't do anything with it. Sorry. Well, what can you do then? You can complain, you can say, okay, give me my $100 back, or whatever. Typically, you won't do any of that because you figure the guy did his best job. And all this kind of stuff. Now, back in the 60s, when we had real crime before drug crimes, the government decided to market fear, and they needed funding for all kinds of psychological warfare problems against us. The CIA needed money for illegally operating clandestine operations and brainwashing citizenry and all kinds of neat things like that. And the government took a bunch of Nazi scientists under a program called Operation Paperclip that had worked in psychological warfare centers at Auschwitz and other concentration camps that used propaganda and psy-war operations on their own people and on Jews. And when the war ended, they, along with the rocket scientists, shipped them all to the United States. And these little demons have been working against us ever since, honing their operation and psychological warfare techniques against various foreign governments and also against our own people. And at that time, when Nixon came in, they decided they better market more drugs because they needed to fund more operations. And the government set up this whole drug scam thing and scared the shit out of people. We had war going on in Vietnam. We supplied drugs to our soldiers there to keep them quiet, keep them placated, and then we'd bust them when they came back home. And the whole drug scare clogged the courts. When I first started practicing law, the courts weren't clogged, but eventually it became that way, and they said that the worst evil in the history of mankind was drug addiction, drug use, etc., and started to prosecute marijuana smokers, not because they were dangerous or anything else, but because they were against the war and didn't go along with the government's propaganda machine. Well, at the same time, the government, through the CIA, set up a program called MK-Ultra. And MK-Ultra was a drug experiment program run by the CIA. They took parliamentarians' wives up at McGill University and experimented on them. they tried to make a Manchurian candidate. Two of my clients that were psychiatrists and psychologists worked on the program. One worked with the brainwashing program sponsored by the Veterans Administration after the Korean War, and another one was a psychiatrist with MK Ultra. His patient ended up doing a swan dive out of a New York hotel window. In any event, they had all of this data from the Nazi scientists and from Sandoz Laboratories, which was a Swiss pharmaceutical company, about hallucinogenics and various other drugs, which they classified and which the CIA kept to themselves in order to use on unwilling and maybe some willing substances. So, for instance, they would go set up a brothel. The CIA would set up a brothel. And they would bring people into the brothel and have the girls there dose them with various drugs to see if they would talk, to see if they would act out of their heads or do this, that, or the other. The whole purpose was to weaponize psychological warfare operations and create a Manchurian candidate, but also to placate a big population. Well, as a result of the drug war, courts became more and more crowded. Civil cases became more and more backlogged. The emphasis was on prosecuting drug cases and political activists, things like this. And our whole judicial system got all fucked up. And we've been trying to straighten that out ever since then. Why am I talking about this? Because I'm working on a project now. We are trying, a group of us is trying to get the government to shake loose some of its MK Ultra files and give us the research, give us access to the research to see what might be medically beneficial to the public, rather than how do we weaponize drugs so that we can go out and kill each other and slaughter each other and have other people go postal and scare the shit out of our population. With this in mind, I'm going to start doing a series of programs here regarding this. But one of the things I'm working on is one of my clients was a roommate with Sonny Franchise, who was French Connection Mafia Don. French Connection was the French intelligence operation that the CIA took over of the drugs in run by the French in French Indochina. Another client of mine ran the cartel operations out of the South American area of Colombia, some Venezuela, and Bolivia. That was a CIA operation, which has also been with us since the United Fruit Companies in the 50s. So we have all this stuff going on and all this propaganda shit going on. And we're scared, we're running into things we don't understand, and the government is manipulating us so that we can't understand by clouding our minds with various things other than the truth. And I think we deserve to know the truth. So I'd like to start a movement that we get to the truth, that they quit hiding behind the drug war and just disclose what the drug war was, disclose the propaganda behind it, the media manipulation with shows like Efren Zimbalist FBI, the Treasury agent guy, Mission Impossible, all of this other stuff that was intended to titillate and divert us from actually what was really going on. Now, I want to go into some things that happened recently. As some of you know from my last thing, I just got out of the hospital. And the hospital was very stressful. I went in there, we had stopped traveling for 2 years because of COVID. COVID was over, etc. And I was having lung problems, so I decided to go down to sea level where I could breathe easier without having to have supplemental oxygen. I go down there and I get back from sea level and I'm having respiratory distress. I go to the emergency room and I find out I have a bad virus, and the virus caused pneumonia. So I got treated for the virus and pneumonia, and I also had pain from breathing, which was a result of pleurisy, in addition to my shortness of breath and COPD and recovering from my broken leg. I get there. It takes me 8 hours to get a meal, and they're very sorry. The next day, certain things come in, and certain things happen, and they're very sorry. One of the things I had was explosive diarrhea, and nobody said that I was a risk, but they have a protocol. If you're in there, you've got to have a pressure pad, so anytime you move, you got to call a nurse. The problem is I was in quarantine because of the COVID stuff and the RSV virus and all this kind of stuff. So I'm in the room, and they tell me they take away my walker, and I can walk without a walker. I use a cane a lot, but I'm not mobilely that impaired. But they take my walker away, they take everything else away, they put me on a bed that every time I move, an alarm goes off, and they tell me I'm supposed to wait until somebody comes in before I can get up to go to the bathroom, or anything else for that matter. And I'm sitting there, and I feel the urge. And I push the button, and nobody comes, and nobody comes. Well, apparently they have to put on a separate change of gowns when they come into the room. So that takes a while. Meanwhile, I had explosive diarrhea, and I created a shitstorm, which personally is embarrassing to me. I'm embarrassed that I caused a lot of effort to others. I'm embarrassed that I had to have them clean up my mess. I'm embarrassed at the fact that they couldn't get to me in time. And I vowed that I would try my damnedest to keep from having him go through that again. They get me cleaned up, things like this. I finally get my breakfast a little bit later, I think it's 7 o'clock at night, and everything is fine. We negotiate somewhat about the fact that because of my age and various infirmities, I can't wait for a half an hour for somebody to leave a nursing station to come in and accompany me to the bathroom. So I make a deal that they'll take away the pressure pad. I will call them, and I will try my damnedest to use a walker, etc., to go to the bathroom. Well, the next few days, everything is fine. There's no restriction on my diets. I'm getting along fine with the staff. And then I have a heart procedure because they thought maybe I had endocarditis, which is bacteria on a heart valve. So I had a procedure for that, and I had to be put under anesthetic. Well, unfortunately, some of my good friends who are lawyers went under anesthetic at my age, and they never really recovered. They never got their minds back. I recovered from anesthetic, and I didn't think I was thinking clearly, and one of my worst fears is losing my mind. So I expressed this fear to the hospital staff. In the meantime, it was time for lunch. My wife had come in, and we had ordered lunch, and then she was going to walk from Boulder Hospital to the YMCA for exercise class, which is about 12 blocks, which should take a while for her to do. We order lunch, and it comes down and it waits outside in a tray. The tray's sitting there, and I'm in the room waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, I heard her offer to bring the tray into me when she left to go to the YMCA. They said, no, we have to check with the nurse. Well, now they're checking with the nurse. A half an hour elapses. I'm sitting there. My blood sugar's down because I'm diabetic. I'm worried that I'm losing my mind because I've been under anesthetic. I'm under a lot of stress. I have pneumonia. I have a virus. And generally, I'm unhappy. So finally, after, say, 35 to 40 minutes, I called the nurse's station and I said, why can't I have my goddamn lunch? The nurse's station snottily answers, well, I will politely ask your nurse. Now, one of the things I don't need under the circumstances is a fucking grammar police. And I don't need some kid correcting my grammar or the way in which I say things. I feel having to wait 30 minutes for somebody to approve me getting lunch at an hour and a half after lunchtime should be ample enough time, and that I should not have to be corrected by some bourgeois country club young lady receptionist to tell me I should be polite. That's annoying. So I sit there and sit there and sit there, and finally the lunch comes. And what I did was I said, I don't want it. I'm on strike. I want to talk to the hospital administrator. Well, they don't want me going on strike. They don't want me to do anything. So what they do is they come in and call somebody that I think was trained in conflict management. Now, here's where it gets almost ridiculous. I have an undergraduate and graduate work in sociology. I'm a criminologist. After I became a criminologist, I went to law school. After law school, I went back to school and took more graduate courses, and I went through what they called a conflict curriculum. I took social theory, modern social theory, postmodern social theory, 2 cases of conflict resolution, and one out of the consortium called leadership. So that gives me 3, 6, 9, 15, 18 hours of postdoctoral or postgraduate courses in conflict management. So I'm a trained mediator. Not only that, I was a union official. I was a negotiator for union contracts. So I'm not unaware of the techniques. In fact, I taught some of them. So here we got some kid, maybe out of college, obviously not out of graduate school, coming in and using anger management, negotiations, and techniques, and conflict resolution techniques on me. Because I'm excited because I didn't get my lunch for over an hour. Now, if I were teaching the course in conflict management, or if I were doing conflict management, the first thing I would tell somebody is find out what the problem is. So you would go in and say, okay, Mr. Blewett, what is the problem here? I understand you're upset. What's the problem? What can I do to alleviate? What can I do to help? And I would have said, it's taken you people an hour and a half to have my lunch sitting out in the hallway, and I still don't have it. I'm hungry. I would like to have the lunch. Why can't I have it? Well, that seems like a reasonable thing. I would have expected to have gotten the lunch. Instead, I get managed. And the professional staff says, we won't do anything until you calm down. You have to settle down. You can't raise your voice. If you raise your voice, we're going to walk away. Well, here I have. I've sat there. I'm diabetic. I got low blood sugar. I'm worried about having had a stroke under the anesthetic. I'm frustrated. And they say I got to settle down. They're upset because I raised my voice. And I said, God damn. Well, I really, really, really resent being manipulated by that, particularly by amateurs. So again, I want to get in on training. If you're going to train somebody in this area, then don't do a half-assed job. And none of these people were adequately trained. They did a half-assed job. They shouldn't have been doing it at all if they don't know what they're doing. And these obviously didn't know what they're doing. Not only that, who the hell are they to withhold services until I lower my voice or not get excited or not raise my blood pressure? That's not up to them. Their deal is to tone the situation down, to de-escalate. It's the same mental set as when all these police went up to help a kid that was having a nervous breakdown in the mountains and say he was afraid. And the cops go up there, and since he wouldn't put a knife down, they murdered him in his car. And they were told to go up there to help the guy out. Well, you're not helping somebody out very well if you're murdering him in the meantime. Another recent case, a person got shot in Lafayette, Colorado. He hadn't slept for a few days. His wife called him and said he was abusive. It was a domestic violence case. The cops go to the domestic violence location, and he had had a butcher knife, and he'd sliced his wrists and sliced his throat and slashed his arms and did all kinds of self-mutilation. They came to the door, and the police said, put down the knife. He raised the knife, and apparently one of the officers said he lunged at them. So they murdered him. Now, when I was in law school, they were talked about self-defense, fear of your life, things like that. Never was an excuse to murder. You were expected to retreat to the last position, the last possible position before you took any steps that would injure somebody. But we don't train them this way. We retrain them. First off, you have to control the situation. You have to control the situation even if you have to kill the subject. So I want to make a few observations here. First off, I went through all this graduate school, undergraduate school, law school, and shit like that. But you know where I got the best training to be a lawyer? The best training to be a mediator? The best training to diffuse situations? Was none of that. Because you have class biases. No matter what, if you're in a certain class, you're going to look down on people. You're going to feel superior. The best training I got for any of that was when I went to barber school. Barber school was located then on Skid Row. I was there for 7 months, every day, 6 days a week, from 8 in the morning to 5 at night. The customers were called Skid Row hobos, or sometimes winos. They were homeless. And this was in the early 60s. And I didn't use de-escalation techniques on them. I didn't do anything. They came into the shop to get hot towels put on their face if they came to town in a coal car, or to get shaved if they had a beard, or get their hair cuts, or get halfway presentable. Some of them were drunk. Some of them were just batshit crazy insane. Some of them were nice. A lot of them were former World War II vets. Some of them were Korean War vets. Some of them were cowboys. Some of them were sheep herders. All of them drank a lot. And I didn't get the luxury of saying, I don't want to wait on you because you're drinking, or I don't want to wait on you because you're inferior, or I don't want to wait on you because I don't approve of you. No, they got down in the chair and I had to deal with them. If I didn't deal with them, I had to get more credits and I wouldn't get out of barber school. So to get out of barber school so I could make a living cutting hair, I had to deal with all kinds of people. And at that time, the customer was always right. I didn't have somebody saying, well, we can't let this guy sit in your chair if you feel unsafe, or we're afraid this guy might hurt you, or whatever. You sat them in the chair, and if something happened that was a little bit of a threat or something you didn't like, you called some of your classmates to kind of keep an eye on things, and you learned how to resolve conflict. Now, that's the only way you can make a living. You can't make a living waiting on people when you say, fuck you, I don't like your attitude, or I don't like the way you dress, I don't like the way you comb your hair, or I don't like the way your eyes slant. That's not right. If you're going to be a nurse, you're going to treat patients. You can't pick and choose. If you're going to feed people, you can't pick and choose. If you're going to treat people, you can't pick and choose. Otherwise, go to school and become a goddamn accountant. And if you don't want to be an accountant, if you want to help people, then help them. Don't murder them if they don't follow your orders and follow your instruction to take control. Because I'm telling you right now, getting control is not the trick to de-escalation. Any instructor that says that's what you have to do first ought to have his instruction certificates shredded. They ought to be fired. They're not instructing. They are fascist dictators. Now, I don't know about a lot of you people, but my father put himself at risk in World War II to fight fascism. I put myself at risk in the South to fight fascism, to fight racism, when I was in civil rights marches, when I was doing various criminal cases in the South, and I did cases in Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, and New Mexico. So don't tell me all this bullshit stuff that I'm entitled and all this other stuff. I could have chosen another profession if I didn't want to deal with people, if I didn't think I could help them, if I didn't want to help them. I'd have been a goddamn accountant, or I'd have been a corporate lawyer or something like that. What I really resent is the corporate mentality of prosecutors and upper middle class do-gooders who think they're so much better than I, and that in order for them to help me, they either have to take control of me, order me around, or fucking kill me. I think we ought to look at that, and I think we ought to take a very, very hard look at that, and it's time for some pro-action. Next time anybody shoots a policeman, demand how the police were trained. Demand how they were trained to react. Demand what their training was. If they say they're feared for their life, ask them what kind of coward they were to be fearful of their life. Ask them if they couldn't take a step backward. Ask them if they couldn't walk away. Ask them why it was so hard to walk away. Ask them why they felt the need to take control. And if they can't answer these in a civilized, rational manner, then take away their goddamn badges. They don't deserve to have a badge. They don't deserve to be law enforcement officers. Give them a Nazi arm belt and a swastika, put it on their armband, and tell them to say Sieg Heil and teach them that. I think we as a society should demand better from the people that we pay to serve us and protect us. We pay them to serve us, not murder us. And that's my dangerous dragon for today. I hope you have some comments. I hope everybody shreds me, criticizes me, makes fun of me, and calls me a dumbass. Until that time, have a good night.